Now's your time. Better live it today. Take a stand. Meet your dreams halfway. Leave behind all the fear and doubt. And welcome to your beautiful now. Hello again, everyone. Derek Floyd here. Beautiful Now Podcast. Welcome to episode 24 of Beautiful Now Live. Now, this is the segment where I interview special guests about things that are topical, current, and relevant to you, your family, and your community. Hopefully helping you to open up a dialogue with those around you to get to know each other a bit better. And with this being the first podcast of the year, we're going to go in deep on a controversial subject that people have a lot of strong opinions about. So I'm going to do the best I can to be very delicate and very fair to talk about this subject. And I have two special guests that are going to help me do it. This first topic for our first podcast for 2023 is going to be gun control. Is the right to bear arms destroying America from the inside out? With that being a tough subject, let me give you a few details about what we know about gun control. Here's some of the details I've looked up online. The New York Times reports that firearms kill more Americans than they do people in any other comparable nation. Tough factoid. According to the data compiled by the Gun Violence Archive, a nonprofit organization that tracks gun violence across the country, there's been at least 607 mass shootings through November 22nd of this year, and that's just short of the 637 mass shootings in the country last year. And if you're not sure, a mass shooting, the definition is, as an incident in which four or more people, excluding the perpetrator, who are shot in a single event, regardless of the motive, setting, or number of deaths. But what about multiple things that have happened along last year? We've got some situations here. If you recall, remember the massacre at Walmart in Chesapeake, Virginia, that left 6 people dead? Or what about the rampage in the LGBTQ nightclub that left 5 people dead? And of course, we all are dear to our heart about the Robb Elementary School massacre in Uvalde, which left 21 dead. We could go on and on with this list about the tragedies that were caused by gun violence, but in order for us to make sense of all this madness, we need to start asking ourselves the hard questions tonight. And I want to be fair and objective in all sides of this really complex dilemma that America finds itself in, which is why I've invited the guests that we have. Now, the first guest is a 23-year veteran of a municipal agency in Palm Beach County. He was a cop there and retired as a sergeant. My other guest served in our armed forces and has been worked extensively in law enforcement at the federal level for over 20 years. So they both have a unique perspective about what it means to carry a gun, why we need a gun, and why the Second Amendment was written in the first place, and how gun violence can be viewed in a different light. So if you please help me welcome these two special guests to help us break down this very sensitive subject of gun violence, Mr. Eric Lawrence and David Dixon. Gentlemen, are you there for me? Thank you for being a part of the podcast.
Yes, sir.
Good to see you, fellas.
Glad to be here.
Good to see you too, man. Thanks for having me on.
Man, I've been waiting for this episode for a while because you guys have that unique perspective on this thing, you know?
Yes, sir. Let's do it.
Absolutely, man.
Man,
whatever you need, man, I'm here for you.
Hey, I'm just going to dive right to the questions. I got the sheet right here. I'm just going to take a look at it and go. First of all, thanks for being a part of the podcast. You know, this goes out to hundreds of thousands of people. We want to make sure everybody gets blessed. We want to leave people encouraged, uplifted, and inspired. So thank you for being a part of it.
Absolutely.
Now, number one, though, here's the first question. Let's get right into it. With everything we've talked about, like the mass shootings, child fatalities, we could go on with all that nonsense. Do you believe we have a gun control issue, or is it a mental health issue? Because after all, the first thing people say is, well, guns don't kill people, people kill people. Is that off or what? Eric, start me off with that one.
I think it's more of a personal issue. A lot of it does have to do with mental health. Whether it's something that's a diagnosable condition because someone has a chemical imbalance, or whether it's all of the stress and things that have happened since COVID to today, the economy and so forth, people's jobs, joblessness, housing prices out of control. I think people are just under a lot of stress. So I think that compounded with just everyday living, I think it causes a certain degree of anxiety and whatnot. and I think it can cause people to snap sometimes and do irrational things. But with that said, that's not all of it. I think that our culture is just growing into one of more intolerance and lack of patience. And I think it's people who actually victimize people. I don't think it's a gun control issue.
But then, and I'm going to go back to David before I have my answer. I want to charge you on this. People, if there were no guns on the street, or there wasn't as many guns, or weren't accessible to guns, but we have the same problem. That's where gun control versus gun violence is really becoming the issue. What do you think?
I wouldn't say that. I'd say that historically speaking, people have always been able to get their hands on firearms. I know that with the entire COVID thing, I can remember gun sales growing. So there's definitely more firearms out there that are accessible. But at the same time, we've had a nation that's been full of guns for years. I don't think the additional guns is what's doing it. I know that most people that I know who own firearms are decent people who are responsible gun owners. But it doesn't mean that they don't know people who can access those. And it doesn't mean that a lot of people aren't also just irrational and people who are not as, I'd say, they've got character issues and they don't know how to handle their anger. They don't know how to handle their frustration. And so they're able to take that gun and use that gun.
David, let me bring the question to you. Like we just said, with everything that's happened, I'm saying, is it gun control or mental health issue? Where do you fall with that? Where do you feel like it needs to go?
So I don't think it's either. I think what we have in this country is a heart issue. Are we teaching our young people to value human life? Are we teaching our children to fear God? Are we teaching them that we are made in the image of God and we have inherent value? Are we giving young men an identity which you can only get from God? Are we teaching them what God created them to be? Because most of these crimes are being committed by young men.
Yeah.
Okay, whether it be gang violence and some of these mass shootings, you see they're young men, even in their 20s, young 20s. So I think what the issue is that our society has distanced themselves from God, which is the only foundation we have for moral, values. You see what I'm saying? So now, you send children to school and now they're being taught that they evolved from, primordial soup and they just here by chance. So now what are these young men and young children are what are they left to believe in? Now they get to determine what is right or wrong in their own eyes. So why are we surprised?
Yeah.
When society has deliberately told God to get out. So why are we surprised when God walks out the door?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So this is just a symptom of a godless society that we have. That people don't see any value in human life. Young men don't realize their identity, which is to protect human life, right?
Right.
God gave us the role of being a protector. See, so that is the root cause of the problem.
I cannot deny that, man. And believe me, I understand and agree with where your heart is. Being a man of faith myself, I completely understand where that comes from. I think I'm speaking to, like you said, the layman person who just sees this stuff on television, and we will immediately go, well, we need to see more God in this situation. But they're going to say, look, right now, I'm looking at number 2, which is, do you think it's easy to purchase guns in our country? Because if that person who is not well, as Eric said, or has not have faith in his life, as you're mentioning, if that person has access to a gun, are we making it too easy to get there? Are the background checks strong enough? Eric, what do you think? Background checks.
I think the background checks are strong enough. The background check is going to reflect what's in a person's background that's been officially recorded by government, recorded by police record. If that person does not have a police record, it doesn't mean that that person's not a loose cannon. Doesn't mean that person's not volatile. It just means that person hasn't come on law enforcement's radar. And so you have a lot of people out there who aren't necessarily worthy of having guns, or excuse me, who aren't necessarily those people who are well enough or who have commendable enough character to responsibly own a gun, but because they don't have anything reflected in their background, there's nothing that disqualifies them from purchasing their gun.
Can we
So
make it stronger? Is it possible to make the background checks stronger?
I believe that where there's a will, there's a way, and maybe having people answer questions that might indicate some type of state of mind, such that you could judge that. But then again, at what point do you cross the line and start infringing upon their Second Amendment right to bear arms?
And that's what this conversation is about: is the right to bear arms overpowering the America where we're just seeing too much violence. That's really what this whole discussion ends up being, because it's gonna become, hey, my right to have this arms was written in the Constitution by the people who founded this country, and they founded it under God. So if I have the right to bear this arm, yet my mental stability has been checked out well enough, or I've got issues like David said, I don't have God in my life, or they're not really checked out, it starts to become, there's got to be a line here somewhere. How do we prevent this?
I think better question there. I think better. I said not necessarily the background check with respect to a traditional background in relationship to crimes or activities committed, but checking your background to see if you can answer just the minimal battery questions, whether it's 10, 15, 20 questions or what have you.
Sure.
That would give them sort of an idea of where your head is at.
Yeah.
So that might be an indicator of whether or not you're somebody who's predisposed to random violence or predisposed to be overreactionary, which might make them cause you to have to, meet maybe additional qualifications in order to make that purchase.
Yeah. David, what do you think? Do they need to have stronger background checks, or you think it's all right? You think we're good to go?
It's like Eric was saying, background checks is very limited. You can't background check someone's heart.
Yeah.
Okay, so like Eric says, a killer is not a killer until he kills.
Yeah.
Okay, so you don't know what's inside that person's heart, because we know as human beings, we can fake our way through anything.
True that.
You see what I'm saying? So when I was going in the military, they gave me a psych test. They were asking all kind of questions. Do I feel like hurting myself? Do I feel like hurting other people? It's very easy to fake your way through that test and lie through it and say, no, I'm not having any of those thoughts.
Sure.
So I think those measures are very limited unless you have someone that's a career criminal. And that's not the case. Someone that's a career criminal cannot purchase a gun. It's illegal for someone that's a felon to purchase a gun in this country anyway.
Sure.
And we know criminals don't submit to background checks because obviously they won't pass one.
Yeah.
He's
You
right.
see what I'm saying? So you can't, these things are very limited when someone has evil intent in their heart and no one knows what that intent is. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So and another thing that can become very dangerous is if you are going to now empower the government to determine who's mentally fit to own a weapon.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? So you want to get into that. We know our government has done some unjust things in the past, and we know our government is made of imperfect people. So once you give this power to the government to start determining who's mentally fit to have a weapon, it can get dangerous. It can be abused. How can it be abused? You see what I'm saying? So I don't think there's a perfect method to stop someone with evil intent in their heart that doesn't have any type of criminal history or even a mental history. Some of these people are crazy. They can hide it very well.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? There's a lot of crazy people out there, that hides it very well.
I love that you said the government is run by imperfect people. And if we give them too much power over who is fit and who is not, that starts to take us backwards. Very careful. Gotta be careful in that space.
You remember how that happened a long time ago.
We gotta be careful in that space for sure. And I know we're all going touchy. But we also all have friends and family that have lost loved ones from gun violence. So there's all these
Yeah.
gray areas here. I think my next question goes into a little bit of after background checks. Are most guns traced so we know who owns those guns and what is their purpose for the owner? Like, when they trace that to the person who owns it, does it say, hey, they own it for recreation or for hunting or whatever? Do we have a system like that, Eric? Do you know anything about that?
Well, the trace definitely goes to the person who purchased it last and was registered with the ATF. So if you make a purchase and then later on you sell that firearm to someone else, that purchase that was made through that legal or that lawful gun store is going to come back to you, the person who originally purchased it. And then it's incumbent upon you to keep records so that if law enforcement does an investigation, they come to you, you can hold up a piece of paper and say, I sold it 3 years ago. I sold this thing to Mike Jones on this date, that, whatever, and you got Mike Jones's information. And then they go to Mike Jones. But as far as, I'm sorry, what was the second part of the question?
Well, the question says, are they tracked, like what the purpose is? Like when a person buys a gun, do they have to list, okay, I'm buying this for a particular purpose? Or they just buy it because I want to have a firearm? Doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's basically they're having a firearm. You don't have to state the purpose of your purchase. You only have to state the purpose when you are getting special permission from the ATF, certain stamps, whether you're going to make a short barrel shotgun, short barrel rifle, you're going to get a suppressor, things like that, then you have to state the purpose of that. But as far as making an average, everyday purchase of a firearm from a gun store, no, there's no need to state the purpose of the purchase.
My point of asking that, and David, I'll let you answer as well, was that maybe people would feel more comfortable, or they feel more, I guess, at ease if they knew, okay, Johnny's going to buy this shotgun, but he's a hunter, so it makes sense that he's buying it as a hunter, not just because I want to have a gun and I just, there's just no reason to have that around the house. I know you can't buy a semi-automatic weapon without certain clarification. So I'm thinking the same thing. David, do you think they should be able to have the purpose written into why you buy the gun, or do you think that's infringement on the Second Amendment right to arms?
Oh, that's definitely a huge infringement, my friend.
I'm just trying to figure out how to help these people get these guns out of their hands, man.
So we have to remember the purpose of the Second Amendment. What is it for? And it is not for recreation and is not for hunting. Okay? The Second Amendment was instituted so people can have a way to defend themselves against a tyrannical government. This is what the Second Amendment is for. It wasn't instituted so people go hunting and have it, go to the gun range. It is for the government, to protect oneself from the government. So if you now give the government the power, right, to now determine, hey, you can only have this gun if you're hunting, or you're just going to the gun range and that's it. Now, how can that be abused? You see what I'm saying? And then you get into the tracing. Once a government becomes tyrannical, now they know where to go and get the guns from the people. So I'm going back to the purpose of the Second Amendment is for the government to fear the people having a way to defend themselves. It's not about hunting or recreation or stuff. That's a common misconception I hear people saying. Why do you need that gun to go hunting or to the gun range? The Second Amendment was never for that. It is for the government, for people to be able to protect themselves from the government.
Wow. Eric, what do you feel about that? You in the same vein?
Well, Dave is absolutely right. That collectively, we as American citizens, if we find ourselves being ruled over by a tyrannical government, that we, the people, would have the power to oust the government, unlike we, the people over in Great Britain, that didn't have the power to oust the government. And so they had to continue to live on that under that oppressive rule, which caused them to want to flee the country, come over here and establish something that was different. And so they built into the foundation of the country the ability, if the government gets too big for its britches, to be able to say, nah, y'all got to go. And for the people to collectively get together and be able to do something about it, let their voices be heard and have the power to do it.
All right.
Yeah, and not to get off topic, one of the things that slaves could not do was own a weapon.
Mm.
And what was that reason why they didn't allow slaves to own a weapon? Because that is directly tied to their freedom, to be able to free themselves.
Mm.
You are not free if you're not able to bear arms.
Mm.
So
Wow.
that's the reasons why slaves was definitely not allowed to take up arms.
That's very
That's it.
powerful. Very powerful.
Yeah.
It is powerful.
Mm. And see, I hear people already on the other side going, "What about January 6th and all these people who had these firearms taking
Mhm.
over the country, taking over
Mhm.
the capital? Was that okay? Did
Mhm.
they need to have guns? Was that the purpose of having a gun?"
Yeah.
It's a touchy subject when you think about what happened there. Eric,
Mhm.
in your mind, do you feel like the people of January 6th, the insurrection, if you will, they had a right to bear those arms to launch against our freedom? Yes or no?
Well, I'm trying to recall that I remember the one lady got shot, but the firearms that I saw were primarily possessed by law enforcement there. I
Yeah.
did see people with sticks and objects, and these people were basically coming to assault the Capitol, gain access, and do their thing. But it was law enforcement
Hmm.
that had firearms that
Okay.
wound up, people dying at the hands of law enforcement.
David?
Yeah, yeah. There wasn't any firearms by those people that were, storming the Capitol. From
Right.
what I saw, it wasn't. They probably had like sticks and stuff like that, but there wasn't any firearms involved in that because it would have been a lot worse if people had, firearms and storming the Capitol.
Okay, okay. Then let me circle back around to the question that's going to ask both of you. As a retired law officer of the law and a guardian with the government, with you, David, are you two, as protectors, alarmed at the amount of illegal guns that are in the streets, in the neighborhood? Because it seems like there's just so many illegal guns out there. And what does the average American do to protect himself from that? Does he have to go buy a gun too? Then we've got two guns at each other. That's not really going to solve the problem. No.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely, I saw many guns that were legal guns that were stolen from homes and stolen from vehicles because they weren't secure. And then in that regard, you have an illegal gun on the street, in addition to having illegal guns that did not come through the ATF's system that they've set up. So yes, there are a significant number of illegal guns on the street. But I think whether there was few or whether there's a lot, I believe that everyone who's a responsible citizen and has the temperament for it should be a gun owner.
Yeah.
If not carrying concealed through the laws of your state, at least having one to defend their home. I can recall hearing of a situation in Texas where you had some illegal, I guess you want to call them immigrants, who had come to this country, and many of these people are violent people with ill intent. And so they had gone to a gentleman's house, an older gentleman. They had robbed his entire house. They killed him and left him dead in the house.
Mm, mm,
Then they went down the road several miles and they broke into a home where a 12-year-old girl was home alone.
mm.
Same thing. These two illegal people who had these killed this old man.
Mm-hmm.
But the girl heard them breaking in. She ran upstairs to her father's bedroom, grabbed a shotgun. The first illegal immigrant came to the top of the stairs. She fires a gunshot, kills him. Then she goes to the top of the stairs. The other one's coming up the stairs from the bottom. She takes the same gun and kills him.
Wow.
So if
A
this
12-year-old girl?
12-year-old girl.
Wow.
So you got, chalk two up for the good guys. But if this girl, and I have a 12-year-old daughter myself, she's a seventh grader. If this 12-year-old girl in Texas were home alone with no firearms, she'd have been a statistic just like the gentleman that they had killed just down the road and just moments earlier.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
David, your thoughts?
Yeah. So the thing about the illegal guns is that a lot of illegal guns, you know where they come from?
Mm-hmm.
They come from our borders.
Yep.
Okay, they are trafficked in across our border. So if we're really concerned and want to solve the issue about taking illegal guns off the street, then we would advocate for closing the border and having tougher immigration laws to make sure people are not bringing guns across the border, because that's where criminals get their guns from. They're coming across the border, and they get sold on the black market. Okay, so anyone that is, complaining about gun violence, but is perfectly fine with an open border or people coming into the country illegally, they're not interested in actually solving the problem. And you're being a hypocrite. Because if you're concerned with gun violence, then you should be concerned with where the illegal guns come from.
Yeah.
And they come from across that border. So I think if you want to minimize the amounts of illegal guns on the street, one way to do it is to stop it from coming across the border. But I'm not going to get too deep into that weeds.
Yeah, and I get that, and I don't want you to take any further than where you need to go. I think where I want to say is that the border issue is such a delicate issue right now, and I think as a fellow man of faith and as a person who believes that gun violence is getting out of control and that the guns are coming from somewhere, when I hear about governors putting people in a bus or in a truck and shipping them somewhere just off the border like they're cattle, it makes me sick. When I hear people, when there's thousands of people across this borderline just coming to be safety because they just can't be where they are. America's the home of the free, home of the brave. And we can't let them in. And I get it, because I see the governors and the cities are saying, we don't have any room for all these people. So there's a dichotomy here. There's an issue that is not solved yet. And this conversation won't solve it, but it definitely needs to be discussed. And it's such a bigger issue than just let them cross the border. There needs to be a better system in place where we can put the people that are coming here to be a part of the American culture. It's just so much deeper than this conversation. But I 100% agree with you. And we do need a better system. And I don't think it's a political thing. I think someone needs to come up with something. It's not a Democrat or Republican thing. We just need to have someone brilliant enough to come up with a better system to put it in place.
I agree.
Yeah,
good point.
So, because I don't want to make it a political thing. It's not. It's a human rights thing. How am I going to take somebody in a truck and ship them like they're cattle to some other city and get out? That just made me burns my blood to hear that someone did that as if they had no value.
But part of the reason that they've done that is that they're trying to make a statement from these and Florida is one of them as well. If you think about the borders of the U.S., Florida is a border state because you cross. That's one of the first states that you enter when you come into this country. So when you see these states who are saying they listen to many of these others in other states who say that, people should be given a safe haven and allowed to cross the border and do this and do that. Well, that's very easy to say when you live in New England.
Yeah.
That's very easy to say when you live in Montana or Washington State.
Agreed.
That's very easy to say by South Dakota. So, because you ain't never going to see any of those people.
Agreed.
Okay? It's not going to affect you. So, to make a political statement, what many of those governors have said is, if you are so in favor of them, then please, by all means, give them lodging and give them this safe haven and accept them in your state. Just to make a statement that the very minuscule experience you have of these illegals coming to this country, we have that in spades, or we have that exponentially every day. That's why.
That's a tough one. I'm going to leave it right there because I don't want anybody else to talk about anything else they should get in trouble. But we all agree it's a situation that needs to be dealt with, and it needs to be dealt with.
I agree.
Outside the political realm. It needs to be dealt with a heart and a love for people. And like you said, David, we need to put God in the situation. What would God do with this situation? What would Jesus do with this? But I'm going to leave it right there. We'll come back to that on another episode on the Beautiful Now podcast. But let's get the rest of these questions about gun violence and gun control. You guys got me riled up now, fellas. It's all your fault. Here's a good question. Should civilians be allowed to have any gun they choose, like automatic weapons, whatever? Why or why not? Eric, what do you think?
I think right now the laws and the regulations that they have on it seem to be sufficient. Citizens are not allowed to have fully automatic weapons. You have to make application for that. There are certain weapons that citizens can't get that police and military can get. But at the same time, they are allowed to have, very large capacity magazines for these rifles, even large capacity magazines for handguns in most states. In California and states like New Jersey or whatever, they have different regulations. But I think that the laws that we have in place are sufficient. Like David said, now, if we're going to protect ourselves against a tyrannical government and we're only allowed to have a magazine capacity of 10 rounds, it's going to make it very difficult, being that they have so much in their favor already.
Yep.
So again,
Yep.
it's not so much the multitude of rounds as it is, as David stated, and I'm not trying to get back to more of a religious angle, because I realize that the purpose of this podcast is to appeal to everybody in the common man on the street whose mind doesn't necessarily go there. But whether you call it God and their spiritual condition, or whether you just call it the condition of their heart in relationship to their concern for their fellow man.
Yes.
The bottom line is, how do you look at others and value other human life? And what type of character do you have? You're either responsible or you're an irresponsible individual. If you're irresponsible, you need to tighten that up whether you have a gun or not, because it's going to show up in other areas of your life.
Sure.
And gun ownership is just going to be one of them. So we don't have a gun problem. We've got a character problem. The character of this nation, as lived out by the citizens of this nation, has just been continually declining over the past 50 years. The value systems of the Brady Bunch are gone.
Yep.
Yeah, those are definitely gone, man.
Yeah.
I'm gonna,
I grew up on the Brady Bunch, and
I appreciate your level-headedness and your candor to be able to talk to everyone, not just Christians or people of faith, because this podcast is designed to be able to reach everyone. And my goal is always to be able to uplift, encourage, and inspire those, everybody. And I think what David talks about is, where's your character, where's your heart? Like you were saying, if we could get our character right, a lot of this would change. But man, that starts at the beginning. That starts at child level. That starts at kid level. It starts at parents level, teaching kids how to be responsible and how to where the words in character and integrity and honor mean something. When it was the Boy Scouts, when those words meant something, the country was a different place. Now those words are so watered down, and it's all about influencer and and influence.
Right.
It's the whole different world. So and my civil rights, you can't tell me how to be. We can't even go there. I know y'all listening. It's okay. We're gonna skip that one too. That's another episode. Y'all got me all right up. It's your fault. I'm giving this one to David though. David, what about how we handle guns in our homes? Is there like a class that the average person can walk through to tell them how to handle their weapons, safe storage, keeping away from kids, that kind of thing? How does that come about?
Yeah, well, there's plenty of classes, available for people, if they want to learn, gun safety, but it's not required. You see what I'm saying? So they don't necessarily have to do that, but to bring that gun home, you still have to go through a background check. And that's even for a law enforcement officer. So if I go to buy a gun, like from a gun show, I cannot take that gun home the same day unless I pass a background check. It usually takes a few days. And once you pass it, then you can go and pick up the gun and bring it home. But there's no gun, safety classes that's required by the government. Now, once again, we get into that touchy territory. Do we want to give the government the power, the ability to say, oh, for you to own a gun, you got to do this and this and this, and then this and this and this. You see what I'm saying? You got to go through this class and this class, and you got to pay this fee and this fee. And then maybe once you're done with all that, then we'll approve you to have a weapon. You see, so I think the average person that's a gun owner is a responsible person that usually would take the initiative to learn gun safety, especially if you have a family, to buy a gun box, to make sure it's locked up, to make sure it's unloaded. So I think most, the people that are doing the people that are doing the carnage are usually the small percentage of people. 98% of gun owners are law-abiding citizens that that do the right thing, and they're very safe, when it comes to their weapons. So most of the deaths in this country are not because someone is not being safe with their gun at home.
Mm.
Most of it is done through mass shootings and through gang violence.
Well,
You
let
see
me
what I'm saying?
pause you there because I feel like the reason I even asked that question was because I've seen more and more as of late
Hmm.
statistics where kids have gotten a hold of guns in a house and shot
Yeah.
something by accident. The
Hmm.
gun was not in a box locked. The gun was loaded. The gun was accessible. And my point to a lot of these parents that are out there that are saying, "How can we let the people have guns?" My thing would be, I'm not asking the government to mandate, and I know I know what you're saying. It's such a touchy line, but at the same
Yeah.
time, there should be some type of, hey, when you own a gun, you have to lock it up. Here's what you do. Here's why. Maybe a 30-minute video you have to watch that at least you can say
Mhm.
you signed off that you watched it. Because there's
But
just
even
too
if
many kids shooting other kids by accident because the gun was in the house. You see what I'm saying?
yeah, but
Yeah.
even if you got to remember, we're dealing with imperfect people. So even if you require someone to go through a gun safety course,
Yeah.
they can still be negligent,
Oh, yeah.
right?
We're
All
just
right.
trying
So
to
you
cut
see,
it down. We're trying to at
yeah,
least
yeah.
put some barriers in place to cut down the possibility of.
You
Nothing's
see what I'm
perfect.
saying?
We know that.
So you see, I know law enforcement officers that are negligent with their weapons.
Yeah.
Okay, and they have the most intense, in-depth training. So that's not necessarily going to eliminate that. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because people can still be irresponsible, even though they know to do better, but they don't do better. Right?
Sure.
We all know
Sure.
to do better sometimes, and we still don't do better.
Yeah.
I just don't want to give the government, you know, a reason to put obstacles in front of people to be able to defend themselves against said government.
Sure.
You know what I'm
Sure.
saying?
But with that said, I would say this: the same way you complete a background check or when you're purchasing a gun, it's quite possible to add 7 or 8 more sentences to that
Yeah.
says, I, as the gun owner, understand that I'm always to keep a firearm pointed in a safe direction. I'm
Ex-
never to store the gun and the ammunition loaded together. I'm never to do this, this, this. And at the bottom, you sign. I signed to acknowledge that I have read and understand these responsibilities that I have as a gun owner or gun purchaser, purchasing this
Mhm.
firearm. There's
Mhm.
nothing to say that you're going to be legally now sued or whether because you violated it. But what it does is it does give people an extra measure of saying, I was at least briefed on
Mhm.
these things.
Mhm.
And if you have a state law like we do in Florida that says that if minors get their hands on their guns in your home, that you can be charged criminally because the person got their hands on it,
Mhm.
that you
Mhm.
understand the Florida state statute says ABCXYZ.
Mhm.
Now,
Yeah.
signing off on that's going to make you think about those things at least. And
Exactly.
that's going to be an additional mental prompting for you to be responsible with your firearm.
That's where I want to go. And I wish, like you said, if we could just add a few more sentences to that check background check,
Exactly.
hey,
Correct.
then we'd know. And that's all I'm asking for. And I know many parents across this country are asking for the same thing. How do we know what safe gun protection, safe gun
Right.
handling is in a home? And,
Right.
and they don't say that in the magazine when you buy it from the gun shop. They just say you got to have fun. Here's your weapons. You know.
Exactly.
But let me veer this question to you. And see if I can close it around a little bit. With so many guns out there, illegally and legally, do you think that pulling some of the guns off the street, like either like with a government buyback program or some kind of program where you were able to pull some of those out of there, do you think that would help, or do you think we're going against the Second Amendment again for saying we'll buy back your firearms?
Is that David or me?
Let's go with David, 'cause I know David's going to give me a whole lot to say about it. I can see it on his face. He about to tell me, no, you can't take my guns. I know you
As
about to
a
go
fellow
there.
law enforcement officer, I'm hoping he's going to give the right response.
Listen,
Come
listen.
on.
First of all, to me, gun buybacks don't work. Why? Because criminals are not going to sell their guns back to the government or to their local government. They're criminals for a reason, so they're going to keep their illegal guns. They're not going to sell it back to the government or local PD. And number two, they literally is like, buying your gun for like, you know, like less than half of what you paid for it. I mean, they're literally like you paid $1,500, for an M4, and they're giving you like $200 for it. So, it's not even a big incentive for a law-abiding citizen
Okay.
to buy back their gun,
Okay.
to sell their gun, and that gun buyback program is targeting criminals. Hopefully, take a gun out of someone who
Right.
might commit a crime, and they're not going to be selling their guns back to the to the police department.
Sure.
You know
Sure.
what I'm saying? So that's my stance on that one.
Oh man, Mr. Eric, give me your version of that.
Well, I partly agree with David. I do. But partly I do see this, and that is you have a lot of people. Sometimes crimes or violence is a crime or incident of opportunity. You have a situation that erupts. You've got Johnny or you've got Tyrone who says, you know what, my auntie got a gun up in the closet. I'm gonna show that mofo something. I'm gonna go down the street and do this, that, and the other. Well, if that gun was not up in auntie's closet, then Tyrone would not be able to get his hands on the gun. And so there are a lot of firearms that aren't necessarily M4s or M1s and what have you that are expensive guns, but they might be an old 50-year-old Saturday night special that's been laying around that somebody says, hey, you know what? I might be able to get me $150, $200 for this thing. I'm gonna go ahead and sell it. Because the sheriff's office, between those type of things and between people knowing that if I find a gun or I know that there's a gun that I can get my hands on and I can turn it over to the sheriff's office is going to pay me for it. Then the sheriff's office takes those guns and destroys them. I know that for those guns that are negligible guns, if we can get them out of auntie's closet, if we can get them out of that basement, if we can get them out of that old shed where they're currently sitting, then we can remove the opportunity for a stupid, impulsive, I guess, act of violence. So that's my 2 cents on it.
Okay, that's where I wanted to hear. I wanted to hear that part of that is solution. I agree with David that the criminals aren't going to sell their guns.
The hardened criminal, the hardened criminal with a nice gat, he ain't giving.
He ain't going to sell that. But
no.
I thought, if we made it enticing enough, maybe he'll drop it and get rid of it. But he's like, I got this gun. Not gonna happen.
If he's got a Glock or a Smith & Wesson M&P, or he's got himself a nice HK or 6 hour, he ain't giving that up.
No.
Hey, I'm trying, y'all.
Money. Come on,
podcast listeners, you hear me trying to help y'all. Okay, I'm trying. All right, look, this is. I'm gonna make this the last question because we're hitting an hour, and I hate to go over too much longer than people. I know y'all listening, but you're gonna turn me off in an hour. I don't want to do that. Here we go. After everything we talked about, how do you feel like gun violence / gun control is affecting the children and their viewpoint of guns? How do you feel like they see guns? Is it a positive? Is it a negative? Should we all have guns? How do you think kids view guns in the house? Eric, you first.
I think kids view guns through the eyes of Fortnite.
You're so right.
I'm saying.
You're so right.
I think that they view guns through the eyes of those other video games that were popular years ago. And when you couple that with the fact that they don't value human life, you couple it with the fact that they can spawn again through Fortnite, you couple it with the fact that character has been on the decline just in general in this country for the past 50 years, like we stated earlier, I think it creates a recipe for increased gun violence and unnecessary, unfortunate loss and destruction of life. And so at the heart of it, however, I do think that maybe some of these games, I do think, and that's secondary. Let me start with number one. I think getting back to the fundamentals of teaching people the fundamentals of who we are as human beings and the value of all of us collectively, okay, and each one caring about his fellow man. I think that is at the heart of it. Additionally, saying when you know who you are, you know what to do. If you're somebody who's not a product of the primordial soup and you see yourself as some dignified human being, then it's above you to go unnecessarily destroying life. It's not who you are, let alone your target of your destruction. So I think that's first, and then maybe reducing some of the graphicness and maybe some of the proliferation of a lot of these violent games that are geared towards children, who studies show that, especially for males, that their frontal lobes aren't developed until about 25 years of age. And so their decision making skills and their view of reality is not mature. It's compromised to some degree.
Love that explanation, and I completely agree with it. Dave, you want to tag onto that?
Yeah, I think it comes down to deliberate parenting. Okay, kids are gonna view guns and gun violence the way you explain it to them and teach them
That's
about
good.
it properly. Okay, so but if you leave your kid, to the PlayStation and to YouTube, then they're gonna have a very negative view of what a gun is supposed to be used for.
That's
And
true.
it's like Eric was saying, the violence in these games make it very easy for a child now to see blood and not be fazed by it. You see what I'm saying? So if a parent is not deliberate, making sure that their kids are not being exposed to certain video games, movies, what I'm saying, music, that encourages violence and stuff like that. So if social media is raising your child, then yes, your your child's going to be in trouble. Society will be in trouble because all that kid is going to learn is violence and to use guns in a negative way. So it's up to us as parents. It comes back down to the parents. A lot of times we like to exclude the parents from it. Where are the parents? The parents have to teach their kids the proper use of a gun and when is violence necessary.
Yeah.
Only to protect one's life, defend yourself, protect your family. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if that kid is not being taught the proper things and being given the correct values, then yeah, they're gonna have a negative view of things. You see what I'm saying? And you don't really want to teach your kid, from the media because the media loves to sensationalize everything.
True.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They want news that gives them ratings. So what do
Yeah.
they give you? Negative news.
Yeah.
So it's up to us as parents to sit our kids down and teach them the right thing to do and how to properly, take care of a firearm and when to use violence. You see what I'm saying?
Well, with that question and that answer, I think that sums it up. I think we have addressed so many different layers to this question. Is the Second Amendment dangerous to America right now? I think you guys have clarified saying no, it's not the Second Amendment. It's the character of the people that have the guns. It's the watchful eye of the parents. It's society's influence on our children. You've given multiple reasons why gun violence is here. You guys are saying it is not the guns. It is the people behind the guns. It is the influence. It is everything else around us that is creating this epidemic of violence.
Yes.
I do appreciate you two taking the time. I know I told you a half an hour, but man, we took an hour, didn't we? We just rolled with it. But
Yes.
you guys are a great, such insight and such wisdom, and you're both men of faith, so I know you were coming from the heart. So all those that are listening to the podcast today, understand these two men weren't coming to you to bash or to set a political view or a political statement. They were coming with real world answers, real world concerns, and they both work in an industry where guns are part of what they do. So they have a healthy respect for the Bear the Right Arms, and they understand what it was for. So for all of you who are listening today, I hope you got a little bit more about this subject. Eric, thank you for stopping by, man. As always, you are always welcome on the program. And David, I've been trying to get you here for a long time, so we finally got you on the program, man.
Yes, sir.
Thanks for stopping by. We sure do appreciate you out there. And for everybody else out there that's watching the program, thank you for stopping by the Beautiful Now podcast. As always, we want to make sure you leave uplifted, encouraged, and inspired. If you enjoyed this content, do me a favor. Stop right now, pause, hit me with a like or subscribe to the channel so that we get the most updated content to you as soon as it's available. And most importantly, for me, if you really enjoy what you see here, share it with a friend because we want to make sure everybody leaves uplifted, encouraged, and inspired. Everybody have a great evening. Take care. We'll talk to you soon. See you next